So there was an op-ed recently in The Guardian by one of Bernie Sanders' surrogate supporters, Zephyr Teachout, a Fordham University law professor, I believe, and she was calling out Joe Biden, rightfully, and citing examples of how he is corrupt and how he has a corruption problem, and how Donald Trump would use that to his advantage to probably win the 2020 election if he was up against Biden. So the kind of corporate media elite were pushing back against this op-ed, and as a result of this pressure, or Bernie Sanders caved in and apologized for his Zephyr Teachout's op-ed in The Guardian, calling out Joe Biden for his corruption. So here's the article from The Guardian. Senator Bernie Sanders apologized to former VP Joe Biden Sunday night after an op-ed by Bernie Sanders surrogate published in The Guardian accused Biden of corruption. Well, we'll read this article and then I'll give you some thoughts. The Vermont senator told CBS News that he regretted the message published by Sanders surrogate Zephyr Teachout, who does not hold an official role at the campaign, but has endorsed and introduced the senator at his rallies. So here's Bernie. It is absolutely not my view that Joe is corrupt in any way, and I'm sorry that op-ed appeared, Sanders told the news channel. His statement follows a Sanders campaign press release that circulated the op-ed to supporters and members of the media, with the heading of the press release reading, "Joe Biden has a big corruption problem," and he does, and they were right to point that out, and it makes sense politically. Highlight that he's corrupt. Keep citing all of the examples you can use to support that claim, and it's going to help Bernie Sanders. And this is a weak move on Bernie's part. And this is one thing that the Republicans, the conservative party in the United States, usually gets, is that when when they're right about something and they know it, or even if they're wrong, they just don't give a shit. They're just going to keep repeating the same talking points over and over and over again, and just keep hitting you across the head with that message. But the Democrats, aren't as good at this whole game of politics compared to the Republicans, and conservative politicians, because they don't like this infighting or standing their ground. But this is the whole part of the primary process, is to highlight why your record and the policy positions that you endorse and support and have supported in the past are better than your opponents. And by highlighting the front runner, or at least tied with Bernie nationally, by highlighting Joe Biden's corruption, it would help Bernie. And by backtracking on this and throwing Zephyr Teachout under the bus, it's just not a good look. Bernie should have stood up for Zephyr Teachout. I mean, you're throwing Zephyr Teachout under the bus, this Fordham University law professor who has been fighting corruption her whole professional life, to my understanding, in order to say that you don't think Joe Biden is corrupt at all, when there's so much clear and convincing evidence that he is. And Zephyr Teachout, points out a lot of good examples of Joe Biden's corruption in this Guardian piece. So, from my opinion, from my perspective, it's just a bad look for Bernie and his campaign, and I really wish that he didn't apologize. He should have came out. Yeah, I support what Zephyr Teachout was trying to get across in this Guardian op-ed. Joe Biden is my friend, because it seems like Bernie always likes to highlight how whoever he's critiquing at the time is his friend. So Joe Biden is my friend, but unfortunately I do think he has a corruption problem, and Zephyr Teachout laid out some pretty excellent points in this Guardian piece. So no, I'm not retracting. I'm not yeah, I'm not retracting. I'm supporting Zephyr Teachout and the claims that she made in this article. I believe that Joe Biden has been corrupt in the past, and I believe it would, definitely harm his chances going against Donald Trump in a 2020 election. And I wouldn't have those same issues. So that's, just another reason to vote for me. Boom. That's what Bernie should have said instead of, just this horrible move politically. And it just doesn't, as a Bernie supporter, it just doesn't feel good having Bernie Sanders, the least corrupt presidential candidate, as in a long time at least, is apologizing to a pretty corrupt presidential candidate in Joe Biden. So that just doesn't sit well with me. And then so this is some of the article from Zephyr Teachout. Looks like middle class Joe has perfected the art of taking big contributions, then representing his corporate donors at the cost of middle and working class Americans, converting campaign contributions into legislative favors and policy positions isn't being moderate. It is the kind of transactional politics Americans have come to loathe, she wrote. Biden has a big corruption problem and it makes him a weak candidate, added Teachout. I know it seems crazy, but a lot of the voters we need, independents and people who might stay home, will look at Biden and Trump say they're all dirty. And then so here's Uncle Joseph. Thanks for acknowledging this, Bernie. These kinds of attacks have no places in the primary. Let's all keep our focus on making Donald Trump a one-term president. Oh my goodness. Yes, that is the focus of making him a one-term president, Joe Biden. If you go up against Donald Trump, we're likely to have a second term of Donald Trump. So do us all a favor. If you're really concerned about Donald Trump only getting one term, drop out now. Tell all of your supporters to endorse Bernie Sanders. Problem solved. Because if you're really that concerned about it, you wouldn't be running in the first place. You have so many just holes in your record and things that Trump can point to. And unfortunately, it seems, since you kind of left politics, your mental faculties have diminished, a pretty substantial amount. Yep, so I was right. Yeah, she's a Fordham law professor, former candidate for governor of New York, and she has endorsed Bernie. So let's take a look just briefly at this op-ed by Zephyr Teachout to see the claims that she's making, and are they so egregious and not backed up by evidence that it made sense for Bernie to retract? I don't think so. Let's see. First, so this is our first example. Biden's support for finance over working class Americans. His career is bankrolled by the credit card industry. He was known as the senator from MBNA because he did the bidding of the credit card and financial industries as a senator. He delivered for it by spearheading a bankruptcy bill that made it harder for Americans to reduce their debts and help cause the financial crisis. He not only authored and voted for that bill, he split with Barack Obama and led the battle to vote down Democratic amendments. Simplest explanation? Yeah, you get campaign contributions from the financial industry. They're not stupid. They know you're going to do their bidding once you get in office, and if you don't, they're not going to keep giving you this big campaign, that big campaign cash. And then this is last year. At a fundraiser last year, Biden promised his Wall Street donors that, quote, nothing would fundamentally change, end quote, for them if he became president. Now the financial world is raising huge money for his campaign. It clearly thinks he's going to be its friend if elected. Most Americans who get ripped off by the financial sector on a daily basis aren't looking for a candidate who has made their life harder. Agreed. Excellent point. And it just makes sense. Why would, if more people knew this stuff about Joe Biden's record, he wouldn't be doing so well. But the corporate media doesn't like to point it out because they're beholden to these same interests. Second, healthcare. On April 25th, the day he announced his campaign, Biden went straight to a fundraiser co-hosted by the chief executive of a major health insurance corporation. No wonder why Joe Biden doesn't support universal healthcare or Medicare for all. He refuses to sign a pledge to reject money from insurance and pharma execs and continues to raise money from healthcare industry donors. His campaign is being bankrolled by a super PAC run by healthcare lobbyists. Yep. And what did all these donors get? A healthcare proposal that preserves the power of the insurance industry and leaves 10 million Americans uninsured. Joe Biden 2020. Third, climate change. Biden signed a pledge not to take money from the fossil fuel industry, then broke his promise. Right after a CNN town hall on climate change, he held a fundraiser hosted by the founder of a fossil fuel conglomerate. He's pushing climate policy that has gotten dismal reviews from several leading environmental groups. There are plenty of other examples that raise questions like housing and Social Security. Big real estate moguls are playing a major role in Biden's campaign. Unlike his rivals, he has no comprehensive health care or comprehensive housing plan. When he pushed for cuts to Social Security, was he serving donors or his constituents? I would say definitely his donors. Yeah, so I mean, those are basically the main points she makes, and then she just goes on to say how Trump would basically use examples of Joe Biden's corruption to his benefit. So what was so egregious there that Bernie had to retract and backpedal from, and also throw a pretty awesome surrogate for him under the bus. So a little disappointing, Bernie. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty disappointed, and you totally just throwing Zephyr Teachout, this pretty awesome surrogate that you have, who is this huge anti-corruption crusader and has been their whole professional career. They post this awesome op-ed for The Guardian citing numerous examples of Joe Biden's corruption accurately, nothing taken out of context, and cited using these examples of Joe Biden's corruption. So why would you apologize to that? Bad move politically. It's not going to help you get any votes. The people that would be appeased by this are people that wouldn't vote for you, in the first place, and it's not going to help your base. Your base wants you to fight and stand up and call out corruption and stand behind your surrogates when they make good points, when they get awesome op-eds published in The Guardian calling out correctly, Joe Biden's corruption. So it's just not a good look for Bernie and his campaign in a lot of levels. And, I hope they get some, moral clarity or authority, or just a stronger backbone to actually stand up and fight and call out corruption and stand behind your surrogates and supporters when they're acting correctly and calling out things as they should be, because otherwise it's not going to help you at all, and it could hurt you in some ways, honestly. So it's just not a good look. And then this is just further evidence of Biden's corruption, just for the cherry on top. I saw this on Twitter. Sean King posted this, and this was when Joe Biden was on Meet the Press back in the day, being interviewed by Tom Brokaw at the time.
On a hunter who is 38 years old, and that's a reference to your son being hired right out of law school by a big company here in Delaware that is the credit card business, MBNA.
Boom.
He got about $100,000 a year, as I recall. You received $214,000 in campaign contributions from the company and from its employees. At the same time, you were fighting for a bankruptcy bill that MBNA really wanted to get passed through the Senate, making it much tougher for everyone to file bankruptcy. Senator Obama was opposed to the bill, among other things, You couldn't, in fact, claim that you had a problem because of big medical bills. You voted against an amendment that would call for a warning on predatory lending. You also called for, you opposed efforts to strengthen the protection of people in bankruptcy.
Yep.
This has been an issue that you've heard about before. Your son was working for the company at the same time. In retrospect, wasn't it inappropriate for someone like you in the middle of all this to have your son collecting money from this big credit card company while you were on the floor protecting its interest?
Absolutely not. My son graduated from Yale Law School. The starting salary in Wall Street is $140,000 a year if he went to lawyer. Options he had. He came home to work for a bank. Surprise, surprise. Number one. Number
So there's Joe Biden back as a senator, defending the corruption of Biden and his son, the firm that he worked at, the MBNA. As Brokaw was pointing out, Joe Biden did the bidding of MBNA with that bankruptcy bill that they really wanted to get passed, and then there's Joe Biden. Oh, nothing's wrong. My son worked from MBNA. He, went to this prestigious Ivy League law school. He could have got a job anywhere. He just wanted to come back home and, work at this bank, and there's nothing to see here, and it's okay. He could have got a job anywhere. It's like, and then you have this stuff with his son and Burisma in Ukraine. I mean, the Joe Biden's corruption just goes on for the decades, and that's why it's so like, I mean, Bernie, why would you say that? Why would you say that that you don't think Joe Biden is corrupt at all? He is so corrupt. So I also have a little trouble with Bernie saying that, because he said, "It is absolutely not my view that Joe Biden is corrupt in any way," and I'm sorry that the op-ed appeared. What? He is corrupt, Bernie. This is the stuff that, young people, independents, people who usually don't vote, all those types of people, they don't vote usually because there's usually not a candidate that worth voting for that isn't seen as corrupt. And then also politicians just using politician speak and not willing to, call a green light, and, having to backpedal and not stand up for what you actually believe in and do this politics thing. That's one of the things that people really like about Bernie Sanders, I think, is that he's seen as honest and genuine and willing to speak, what's on his mind and speak from the heart and, really tell you how he feels about things, no matter, if it's necessarily politically expedient for him to express those ideas or opinions or not. And so I just don't think this is a good look for Bernie or his campaign. And I mean, in his heart of hearts, do you really think that Bernie Sanders doesn't think that Joe Biden is corrupt? And I think I saw him say that he, wanted to move on and focus on the policy. But you focus on the policy, you see that Joe Biden is corrupt. And that's some of what Zephyr Teachout did in that Guardian op-ed. So I'll just leave it here, but I could keep dwelling on and on this, because it's just, I don't know, so frustrating on all these levels. But really hope Bernie Sanders and his campaign learn their lesson. If one of your supporters or a surrogate is, making substantive critiques and attacks against one of your opponents, the leading, opponent in some cases, Joe Biden, let them do that. Support that. If they're, critiquing Biden, on the merits, on his policy, on his track record, otherwise, then it's a bad look. It's not going to help you politically. I think it's actually going to potentially hurt the campaign a little bit, especially if this becomes a pattern of, his Bernie Sanders surrogates, getting the opportunity to publish op-eds and call out Biden rightfully for his corruption. I think it's could potentially take away some of the momentum, and I don't want to see that. We need, Bernie in the White House more than ever. So just their team needs to sharpen up their strategy a little bit. In my opinion, we're not, no, we're not playing rock paper scissors here out at the elementary school playground. This we're playing for keeps. This is serious shit, and they need to start acting like it. In my opinion, at least in this instance. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Please drop them in the comment sections down below. And if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe. I much appreciate it. Much love. Peace.